Jonathan Reed rose before dawn, as he did every day. His silk pajamas gave way to a crisp white shirt and a tailored navy suit. He moved through his vast house with purpose, pausing only to glance at a framed photograph of Emma on the bedside table. She was 5 in the picture, smiling as she clutched a stuffed bear. He wondered how she grew so fast, how years of board meetings and late nights had slipped away from him, while she jumped from one grade to the next. By 6:30 a.m., Jonathan was in his sleek black sedan, speeding toward the glass tower that housed Reed Industries. Even on his daughter's birthday week, he could not slow the machine of his own making. The city streets blurred by as he reviewed spreadsheets on his phone. Profits, losses, forecasts, numbers swarmed his mind like restless bees. He valued every dollar, every contract, every second spent chasing the next big deal. Yet lately, those numbers had begun to lose their luster. In the boardroom, Jonathan presided over the morning meeting as if he were a conductor leading a great symphony. His voice was calm and steady, his orders clear and precise. Under his guidance, the company soared to new heights, earning headlines and applause. When the meeting ended, applause rippled around the table. Jonathan offered a polite nod, but inside, a hollow feeling whispered that applause could not fill. By midday, he slipped away to a private office. He closed the door behind him and stared at the phone on his desk. It connected him to Emma, but rarely did he have time to call her. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of expansion plans, investor dinners, and media interviews. He had promised himself he would call her today, on the eve of her 9th birthday. Yet now, looking at the phone, he doubted he could find even 5 minutes. The sharp knock startled him. His assistant, Marie, stepped in. "Mr. Reed," she said, softly, "do you have time to review the final guest list for Emma's party? The catering team is asking for confirmation by 4. Jonathan rubbed his temples. "Yes, of course," he said, shaking off the heaviness that pressed on his chest. "Show me." Marie brought in a thick binder filled with names, old family friends, business partners, celebrity hosts, dozens of children with expensive toys, and well-dressed parents. Jonathan flipped through the pages. The list was extravagant, even by his standards: clowns, magicians, balloon artists, a 3-tier cake covered in edible gold flakes. Each entry felt more like a business negotiation than a moment of genuine celebration. He paused at the name Emma's class, his brow furrowed. He hadn't thought of inviting her friends. "Add her classmates," he said. He realized he had forgotten that small children mattered most to her. He noticed the list lacked her favorite teacher, Ms. Rivera, and include Ms. Rivera, he added. "She has to be there." Marie smiled briefly, impressed by his sudden care. She adjusted the list. "Anything else?" Jonathan shook his head, though a small voice inside him said that no feature, no guest, no shiny addition could replace the time he lost. He felt a pang of guilt when he thought back to last year's party. He had been on a video call in his office, negotiating a merger when Emma cut her cake. He watched her blow out the candles on a screen, and she had looked resigned, as if she knew her father's heart was elsewhere. The phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. "Can we have a picnic cake? I love strawberry cake best." The words made him smile and cringe. He had already ordered a vanilla cake inside layers of chocolate mousse. He typed back, "We'll have strawberry cake, too." He paused before sending. He did not want her to know he scrambled. "And maybe we'll have a small picnic in the garden," he added, forging a connection. When the workday ended, Jonathan's driver took him home. The mansion's gates opened, and he swept through them without looking at the sprawling gardens, the fountains, or the marble statues. He climbed the staircase to his study, greeting his wife, Claire, who was reviewing invitations on her tablet. She looked up and offered a warm smile. "Everything set for tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. We've confirmed the strawberry cake." He saw the relief in her eyes, but also the sadness. She knew what he would miss. He knew she knew it, too. They exchanged few words about the day itself. They both felt the weight of time slipping away from them. Late into the night, Jonathan sat in his study, the only light coming from a brass lamp. He thought about Emma's first birthday party, held in that same house, but in a small living room before he built the mansion. He remembered the laughter of his young wife and the cheers of friends. He remembered Homer, the family dog, nosing at the cake. In that simple room, he felt content, more alive than he recalled feeling in years. He pushed himself up and walked down the grand hallway. He reached Emma's bedroom door, slightly ajar. Soft fairy lights glowed inside. He peeked in. Emma lay on her bed, tucked under a quilt of pastel flowers. Teddy and Tadal stood guard at her pillows. She clutched a book about princesses. He watched her breathing slow as she drifted to sleep. He felt a surge of love, but also an ache. He wanted to turn back time, to slow it down, to be there with her more often. The next morning, Emma raced downstairs in a pink dress dotted with tiny stars. Her hair fell in loose curls. When she saw her father, she ran to him, hugging his legs. He lifted her into the air, laughing as she squealed. He smelled the shampoo in her hair and felt her warmth against his chest. For a brief moment, everything stopped. The city, the company, the future. Emma tugged his hand. "Let's go see the shed, Daddy," she said. Jonathan frowned. The shed. He tried to smile. Emma nodded, eyes bright. "Yes, where I was born." The memory flickered. A small wooden shed behind a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. It was their first home before he sold his small startup and bought the mansion. After they moved, he forgot the shed existed. He knelt beside her. "Sure, sweetheart, let's go." Inside the shed, dust motes floated in slanted sunlight. It smelled of wood and earth and childhood memories. Jonathan watched Emma run her fingers along the old floorboards. There, in the corner, sat a wooden crate. On top was a single candle set into a bit of clay. Emma explained that she had saved it for her birthday tradition. Jonathan's heart clenched. He lit the candle, and the flame flickered. Emma smiled, looking at the dancing light. Jonathan stood behind her and whispered, "Make your wish." She closed her eyes and blew. The flame danced once, then went out. Emma opened her eyes and hugged him tightly. He felt tears prick at the corners of his own eyes. The old shed, the single candlelit was more than they needed. It was what mattered. He carried Emma out of the shed and back to the party, candle stub in hand. The grand hall was filled with laughter and color. He placed Emma on a chair by the cake table. He realized then that the real celebration was in moments of simple love, not grand displays. That night, as they tucked Emma into bed, Jonathan promised himself he would cherish each simple moment. No more missed phone calls. No more distracted presences. Tomorrow was Emma's birthday, but for him, every day would be her birthday, an opportunity to love, to listen, and to be present. And in that promise, he found a wealth greater than all the gold in his bank. The morning sun came up bright and warm, and the big day was finally here. Jonathan Reed woke early, even earlier than yesterday. Today was Emma's birthday. He slipped into his suit and looked around the dining room. Fresh flowers in tall vases stood on the long table. A stack of boxes held colorful balloons. He saw the chef's notes on the sideboard, reminding the team where to lay out the food. Everything looked perfect outside. In the garden, workers hung garlands on the low hedges. They tied ribbons on the backs of white chairs. Tables held ice buckets full of lemonade and strawberry punch. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming roses. Jonathan smiled, but his heart felt heavy. He worried that all the show might drown the small kindness his daughter wanted. He found Emma in the kitchen. She sat at a little table, her pink dress glowing in the morning light. Her hair was into neat braids tied with blue ribbons. A plate of strawberries sat before her, but she looked more interested in a quiet corner of the room. Jonathan held out his arms and she jumped up. He lifted her high and spun her around. She laughed, her eyes bright. Jonathan felt a flicker of joy, but he kept watch on the clock. He still had so much to do. Guests started arriving soon after 10. First came Mrs. Logan, Emma's old nanny. Next came Mr. Patel, a friend from Jonathan's early days running his first small company. Each shook hands with Jonathan, praising him on the party. Magnificent, they said. He nodded, smiled, but inside he felt guilty. Emma's favorite people, her school friends and teacher, were still inside shy or waiting for an invite. At 11, the children from Emma's class arrived. They wore pastel dresses and neat shirts. Emma's face lit up when she saw them. She ran over and greeted each one with a hug or a wave. They carried small gifts wrapped in bright paper. Emma set them on a side table, careful not to mix ribbon colors. Jonathan watched her. He felt proud, but also worried she might feel shy with so many strangers in the crowd too. A tall magician stood under an arch of balloons. He was in a sparkly suit and had a black top hat. He performed card tricks and made silk scarves appear from his sleeve. The children wiggled forward to watch. Some gasped in wonder. Emma clapped politely but seemed distant. Jonathan walked over and stood behind her. He tapped the magician's hat and paid extra for a second show at the end. He wanted his daughter to see her favorite trick twice. On a long table, the chefs lined up tiny sandwiches, fruit skewers, and cupcakes with pink icing. A 3-tier cake sat at the center, carved into the shape of a castle with little sugar towers. It was beautiful, but not Emma's strawberry cake idea. Jonathan had one small strawberry cake hidden on a side table, as he promised her. Only Emma, her nurse, and his wife Claire knew about it. The party's energy soared. Music floated from hidden speakers. A soft violin tune played first, then a faster song that made children jump and dance. Jonathan clapped along but glanced around for Emma. He saw her wave at guests but then vanish from sight. She slipped away toward the garden hedge. He frowned and started to follow, but a group of investors surrounded him. They asked about plans for a new factory, and Jonathan spoke quickly, answering each question. He felt the weight of their attention, of his duty to his company. Meanwhile, Claire found Emma hiding behind a rose bush. Claire knelt beside her and whispered, "Are you having fun, sweetheart?" Emma nodded but would not say more. Claire brushed a strand of hair from Emma's face and pointed to the cake table. Emma shook her head and clutched her mother's hand. Claire's brow furrowed. She thanked the guest who came to speak with her, then went in search of Jonathan. Jonathan wrapped up the conversation about his factory expansion and spotted his wife hurrying across the lawn. He excused himself and met her at a fountain. Claire looked at him with gentle eyes. "She's hiding again," she said. "She said this isn't what she wanted." Jonathan's heart sank. He realized he had layered too much into the party, too many people, too many lights, too many sounds. He had built a grand stage, but his daughter just wanted a quiet wish. He followed Claire toward the old tool shed. It stood at the edge of the property, its wood faded and gray. Jonathan's heart thumped. Memories rose in his mind, days when the shed was just the back wall of their tiny kitchen. On the old house, he had built the shed as a storage space, never imagining it would mean so much to Emma. He opened the creaking door and found Emma standing inside. Dust motes danced in the beam of sunlight that slipped through a crack in the boards. She stood beside the small wooden box that held her single birthday candle. Her pink dress brushed against the rough wood floor. She stared at the candle, her breath gentle. Jonathan stood still, not wanting to startle her. Emma felt her father's presence and turned slowly. Her eyes filled with relief. She smiled and said, "I wanted to do this before everything else." She pointed to the candle. "This is the first candle I ever blew out. It is my special wish." Jonathan stepped forward and lifted her onto his hip. He sat on an old crate beside her. He watched as she held her small hands together and closed her eyes. The warm light from the candle made her hair glow. Jonathan felt tears fill his eyes. He reached for his matchbox and struck a match. He lit the candle. The flame quivered. Emma opened her eyes and smiled. She whispered her wish. Jonathan leaned close to hear it, but he knew her wish, to have her father with her more, to have simple moments instead of big shows. He brushed her cheek with his thumb and held her tight. The world outside seemed distant. In that small shed, it was just the two of them and the tiny flame of hope. After a moment, he said softly, "Make your wish, darling." Emma took a deep breath and blew. The flame danced once, then went out. She giggled and threw her arms around him. Jonathan patted her back. He thought about the elaborate cake waiting in the hall, the laughter of many children. But here, Emma was happiest with a single candle. He realized he always chased something bigger, but lost sight of the small joys. All the guest lists, the hired magicians, the gold decorations, they meant nothing compared to this. He carried Emma out of the shed and held her hand as they walked back to the party. The guests lined the garden, clapping when they saw them emerge. Some were confused, but most cheered. Emma waved shyly, her face glowing. Jonathan looked at the crowd and felt a new purpose. He wanted to slow the pace of his life, to be present for these moments. Back at the cake table, he gathered everyone around. He lifted Emma onto a chair beside the strawberry cake. She blew out her candle again, this time on the cake she loved. The children cheered, and Jonathan cheered loudest. He whispered in Emma's ear, "I promise to always find time for you." She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered back, "Thank you, Daddy." The rest of the party flowed smoothly. Fewer speeches, fewer big displays. Jonathan talked with Emma's friends, listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes. He danced once more, but this time with Emma in his arms, rocking gently to the music. He felt light, free of the weight he carried before. By late afternoon, the guests began to leave, each taking home a small gift bag with candy and a thank you note. Emma stood at the gate, waving until the last friend climbed into a car. When it was quiet, Jonathan knelt beside her. The garden looked like a dream under the soft sun. He picked a rose and gave it to her. "Happy birthday," he said. Emma took the rose and pressed it to her cheek. "This was the best birthday ever," she said. Jonathan pulled her close. He breathed in the scent of roses, the sound of birds, the warmth of his daughter's smile. He had seen her joy in the simplest things. He knew then that his real gift to her would be time, presence, and love, and that gift he would give every day. Jonathan Reed woke the next morning feeling lighter than he had in years. He remembered how yesterday had ended, Emma's laughter ringing through the garden, her small hand in his, the simple candle in the old shed. He slipped from bed quietly, careful not to wake Claire. He dressed in a soft sweater and jeans instead of his usual suit. He wanted today to be different, slower, kinder, more about family than business. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and warm muffins. Claire stood at the counter, mixing jam into a bowl. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft. Jonathan kissed her cheek. "Good morning," he replied. "I want to spend today with Emma. Will you help me?" Claire nodded. "Of course, I think she'll love a little adventure." They called Emma into the kitchen. She came in rubbing her eyes, hair loose, wearing her favorite pajamas with little stars. She climbed onto a chair by the table, and Jonathan poured her a cup of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream. She giggled when the cream touched her nose. Claire wiped it away gently. Jonathan felt warmth spread through his chest. He realized this moment's simple breakfast with his wife and daughter was what he had really wanted all along. After breakfast, they surprised Emma with a small gift, a photo album filled with pictures from her life so far. The cover had her name in bright letters. Emma gasped and began to flip through the pages. There were photos of her first steps, her first day of school, family trips. She paused at a picture of the old shed, where she had first blown out her candle. "I forgot we took that picture," she said softly. Jonathan sat beside her and pointed to each photo, telling little stories, how she got her first loose tooth, how she learned to ride a bike, how she made her first painting. Emma listened, her eyes shining. Jonathan saw how happy she was to hear the stories. Later, they decided to do something Emma loved, baking. Claire had a simple recipe for strawberry muffins. The three of them gathered in the large kitchen. Flour covered the counter, and bowls of fresh strawberries sat waiting. Emma washed her hands and tied a small apron around her waist. Jonathan peeled his off to avoid stains on his sweater. Claire took charge, guiding Emma to mix flour, sugar, milk, and eggs. Jonathan carefully chopped strawberries under Emma's watchful eye. When he dropped a chunk on the floor, Emma giggled and picked it up after washing it again. They all laughed together. The kitchen felt warm with sunlight and joy. As the muffins baked, the family sat at the kitchen table sipping lemonade. Emma asked questions about her father's work. Jonathan hesitated, then answered in simple words. He talked about how he built his company, the people who helped him, and why he loved solving problems. He saw Emma nodding, absorbed by his story, instead of numbers and charts. He spoke of teamwork and kindness. Claire squeezed his hand under the table, proud of his honest answers. When the timer dinged, they pulled golden muffins from the oven. Strawberry bits dotted the tops. Emma took the first bite and declared them the best muffins ever. Jonathan felt a burst of pride, not for a business deal, but for a simple treat made with love. Claire served them on a wooden tray, and they carried the muffins outside to the garden. Birds sang in the trees, sunlight filtered through the leaves. They spread a small blanket on the grass and sat down to enjoy their snack. Emma balanced a muffin on her knee, then leaned against her father's shoulder as they ate quietly. After the muffins, Jonathan suggested they visit a nearby park. It was small but pretty, with a pond, ducks, and a winding path. Emma clapped her hands. "Yes, let's go," she said. Jonathan and Claire held her hands as they walked out the gate. For once, Jonathan left his phone behind. He didn't want distractions. He wanted to be fully present. In the park, Emma ran ahead to feed the ducks. She tossed a piece of muffin toward them. The ducks waddled and quacked, and Emma laughed at their silly necks. Jonathan whispered to Claire, "I never knew ducks could be so funny." Claire smiled and shook her head. "Sometimes it takes little moments to remind us," she said. They walked along the path until they reached a small bridge over the pond. Emma leaned on the railing. Watching the water ripple, she pointed out fish beneath the surface. Jonathan knelt beside her and told her about the time he caught a fish at his uncle's cottage. When he was a boy, Emma's eyes widened. She asked if he could teach her to fish someday. Jonathan nodded, promising they would go on a fishing trip. Very soon, as they walked further, they came across a small playground. There was a swing set, a slide, and a climbing frame. Emma rushed to the swings. Jonathan pushed her gently, and she squealed as she swung higher. Claire took photos on her phone, photos of Emma's hair blowing in the wind, her laughing face, and her small hands gripping the swing chains. Jonathan smiled at each picture, knowing he was capturing real memories this time. After the playground, they sat on a bench under a large oak tree. Emma leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. She looked peaceful, tired from all the excitement. Jonathan watched her and thought about his promise yesterday, to find time for her, to be there in small moments every day. He realized that his work would always be there, but childhood is fleeting. He vowed silently to never miss another chance to be with her. On the walk back home, Emma spotted a small ice cream cart by the sidewalk. She begged for a cone, and Jonathan laughed. He bought 3 cones, 1 strawberry for Emma, 1 chocolate for Claire, and 1 vanilla for himself. They sat on a low wall, enjoying their ice cream. A small bird landed nearby, hoping for a crumb. Emma dropped a tiny bit of ice cream for it. The bird pecked happily. Emma whispered to it, "You're welcome, little friend." Jonathan watched her gentle side, feeling his heart swell. When they arrived home, the afternoon sun was lower in the sky. Emma ran to the old shed and peeked inside. Dust motes danced again. She whispered, "Thank you for yesterday." Jonathan reached the shed and sat beside her on the crate. He put his arm around her shoulders. They sat quietly until the sky turned soft pink and orange. He realized he didn't need a grand party to show his love. He needed these simple moments. Inside the house, Claire prepared dinner. Spaghetti with tomato sauce and garlic bread, one of Emma's favorite meals. The smell filled the kitchen. Emma set the table carefully, placing a small vase of daisies in the center. Jonathan washed his hands and helped arrange the plates. He made funny faces at Emma to make her laugh. They all sat and ate together, talking about their day in the park, the ducks, the swings, and the ice cream bird. After dinner, they decided to watch a movie as a family. Emma picked a light-hearted animated film about a little squirrel on an adventure. They curled up on the big couch with blankets and popcorn. Jonathan leaned in close to Emma, and she laid her head on his shoulder. Claire sat on his other side, and Jonathan felt complete. The movie played, but he watched Emma's face more, her smiles, her gasps, her laughter. He realized that this was wealth beyond measure. When the movie ended, it was almost bedtime. Jonathan carried Emma upstairs to her room. He tucked her into bed and kissed her forehead. She hugged him tight. "Thank you for today, Daddy," she whispered. "Best birthday ever." He smiled and whispered back, "Thank you for being you, sweetheart." He stepped back into the hallway and watched her for a moment before closing the door. He turned and saw Claire leaning against the wall. They shared a look, one of understanding, love, and a promise for the future. They would share the load of work and life, making sure to protect these moments that mattered most. Later that night, Jonathan sat in his study but did not open his laptop. Instead, he wrote in a journal for the first time in years. He wrote about the day, the breakfast, the muffins, the ducks, the swings, the ice cream, and the shed. He wrote about his promise to Emma. He wrote that tomorrow and every day after, he would make time for simple joys. He closed the journal and turned off the light. As he climbed into bed, he felt at peace. His life was more than numbers and deals. His life was here, his daughter's laughter, his wife's smile, and the warmth of simple family moments. And with that thought, he drifted into a deep, happy sleep, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Jonathan woke early again, bundled up in a warm sweater. He had promised Emma a special weekend trip. Today, they would go hiking to a quiet lake he had visited as a child. When Emma came downstairs, her eyes lit up at the sight of backpacks and picnic baskets. Claire packed sandwiches, fruit, and hot chocolate in a thermos. Emma hugged her parents tightly. Jonathan felt a swell of joy. This trip would be their greatest adventure yet. They drove out of the city before sunrise. The car's windows showed fields of green and gold, soft hills rolling under a pale sky. Emma leaned against the window, watching cows grazing, and pointed at each new scene. Jonathan slowed the car to let her take it all in. He realized he hadn't slowed down like this in years. He turned off his phone before they left the gates of the mansion. There would be no work calls until tonight. After an hour, they reached the parking area near the trailhead. Tall pines stood like silent guards, their branches swaying in the breeze. Emma hopped out and breathed in the crisp air. Jonathan lifted her onto his shoulders, and she reached for the tree needles, giggling when one tickled her nose. Claire smiled and took pictures. They set off down a dirt path blanketed with soft pine needles. As they walked, Jonathan held Emma's hand and matched her small steps. He told her stories of his childhood hikes, of how he used to collect smooth stones by the water. Emma listened with wide eyes and asked if they could skip rocks when they reached the lake. Jonathan promised they would. They talked about everything: school projects, her favorite games, and what she wanted to be when she grew up. Jonathan realized how little he had known about her daily world before this trip. Halfway along the path, Emma slipped on a loose rock. She cried out as she tumbled to the ground. Jonathan dropped to one knee to help her up. Her ankle was swollen and red. She tried to stand but winced in pain. Jonathan hugged her close and said, "It's okay, sweetheart, I'm here." His own heart hurt more seeing her in pain than any business worry ever had. Claire knelt beside them and gently lifted Emma's foot. She took a small bandage kit from her bag and wrapped Emma's ankle. Emma sniffled but managed a small smile. "Can we still go to the lake?" she whispered. Jonathan brushed her hair from her face. "We will, but in a quieter way," he said. "I'll carry you if I must." Emma nodded, brave despite her tears. Jonathan scooped Emma into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he felt her small body rest against his chest. He rose and carried her the rest of the way. The forest grew more open, and soon they heard water lapping. Jonathan set Emma down on a flat stone and unwrapped the picnic blanket. Claire poured hot chocolate into cups, and they sat together eating sandwiches and apple slices. The lake was smooth like glass, reflecting the tall pines and blue sky. Emma dipped her fingers in the cool water, smiling as ripples spread out. Jonathan knelt beside her and found a smooth stone. He held Emma's hand and showed her how to skip it across the water's surface. The stone skipped twice before sinking. Emma clapped with delight. For a moment, it was just the two of them, father and daughter, lost in simple joy. Suddenly, Jonathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He had forgotten he turned it on. He frowned as he saw an urgent message from a top investor. A new project needed his approval, and they wanted to start work immediately. His chest tightened. He had a decision to make. He looked at Emma swinging her feet in the water, her face lit with contentment. He shut off the phone again without answering. Here was what mattered most. Claire reached for his hand. "You made the right choice," she said softly. Jonathan nodded. He looked at Emma and said, "You taught me something precious today." Emma looked up and grinned. He felt tears in his eyes. He realized he could not let work interrupt these moments again. They spent the afternoon by the lake. Jonathan held Emma on his lap as she sipped hot chocolate. Claire read his storybook to them both. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold. Emma's ankle was wrapped, but healed enough that she could wiggle her toes. She leaned against her father and whispered, "Thank you for staying here." Jonathan kissed her forehead. "I will always stay, my love," he said. As dusk fell, they packed up and walked back to the car. Emma rode on Jonathan's shoulders again, humming a tune. The forest shadows grew long, but his heart felt bright. Back at home, they carried Emma into the house and tucked her into bed. She held her small photo album and drifted to sleep within minutes. Jonathan watched her breathing slow, then slipped out to his study. He opened his journal and wrote about the day, how Emma fell but kept smiling, how he carried her to the lake, how the water felt like a mirror of their bond. He wrote that he refused to answer urgent calls when his daughter needed him. He wrote that family was his true work. After writing, he closed the book and felt a peace deeper than any business victory. At dawn the next day, Jonathan sat alone in the old shed. He lit a single candle on the wooden box, just as Emma had taught him. He held his hands around the flame, breathing in the quiet. He thought of all the hearts he had touched with gold and glass, and of the one small heart that mattered most. The candle flickered, then burned steady. He whispered, "I promise you, Emma, always." The flame burned bright, guiding him forward. "Check," said. Jonathan Reed woke before sunrise, his heart still warm from the memories of yesterday. He stretched and slipped on a soft cotton shirt. Today would be ordinary in the world's eyes: meetings, emails, decisions, but he carried a quiet resolve. He would protect the small moments he learned to treasure. He left his bedroom door ajar so he could peek at Emma's room before the day began. He saw her sleeping soundly, her small chest rising and falling, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked beside her. He studied her face, so peaceful in sleep, and thought about the promise he made to be there, really be there. He turned away softly and made his way to the kitchen. Claire was already up, brewing coffee. The rich aroma filled the room. She looked up and smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Good morning," she said. He bent to kiss her forehead. "Good morning," he answered. They moved together in easy comfort. No hurried words, no racing heart. They were just two parents who found their way back to each other and to their daughter. Emma came down a few minutes later, her hair tousled, eyes bright but sleepy. She wore pajamas with tiny stars, her favorite. She climbed onto a kitchen chair and watched her father and mother prepare breakfast. Jonathan poured fresh orange juice and set plates of oatmeal topped with berries before her. Claire handed him a cup of coffee. Jonathan took a slow sip, savoring the warmth, the taste, and the moment. They spoke about nothing important. What Emma dreamed last night, what kind of game she wanted to play after breakfast. Emma said she dreamed she flew with butterflies. She wanted to draw them later. Jonathan promised they would color pictures of butterflies today. He noticed Emma's smile, how quickly it came and how it lit her face. He felt richer than ever. After breakfast, Emma ran to her room to fetch her art supplies. Claire and Jonathan exchanged a look, no words needed. They had crafted this morning together. Deliberately, lovingly, they sat at the kitchen table, sharing coffee and watching Emma lay out crayons and paper. Sunlight streamed through the window, making dust motes dance. Jonathan thought that simplicity could feel magical. Suddenly, his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced but did not pick it up. Instead, he reached for a notebook and wrote down the number. He would return the call later, after he spent time with his family. He put the phone away, out of sight, and smiled at Claire. She raised an eyebrow and nodded. They had found a new rhythm. Emma returned, humming a tune, and began to draw. She sketched a butterfly with big wings and dotted patterns. Jonathan watched her lines and colors. He remembered showing her pictures of moths and butterflies in a book once. He asked her why she chose those colors. She said they were the same colors as the sunrise. He looked at the orange juice on her plate and laughed softly. Everything connected, if you took time to see. At mid-morning, Claire announced that she had planned a small surprise, a trip to the local children's museum. Emma squealed with delight. Jonathan packed a small bag with water bottles and snacks. He strapped on his jacket, and they set off. Jonathan left his phone in the car. This would be a technology-free visit. The museum was bright and full of wonder. A pretend grocery store where kids could skin play food. A bubble room where giant bubbles enveloped them. A soft building block area. Emma raced from one exhibit to another, dragging her parents along. Jonathan let go of his worry, his business mind, and simply watched Emma's excitement. He helped her stack blocks taller than her waist and then watched as she laughed when they toppled over. He joined her in the bubble room, laughing as the soapy spheres shimmered around them. He lifted Emma high to catch a bubble before it popped. In the art corner of the museum, Emma painted a small canvas. She smeared bright blue and purple paint with wide, careful strokes. Jonathan and Claire cheered her on. The museum guide took a photo of Emma and her painting. Jonathan thanked her and later hung a copy of the photo on the refrigerator at home. He would look at it every morning and remember the feeling of that day. After the museum, they walked to a small cafe for lunch. They shared sandwiches and cookies. Emma told them about her favorite thing in the museum, the bubble tunnel. She asked her father if they could make bubbles at home. Jonathan promised they would try that weekend. She asked if they could have bubble bath tonight. Jonathan agreed. She beamed and took another bite of her cookie. Back at the mansion, they found the old garden shed open. Emma ran inside, trailing Claire and Jonathan. She ran straight to the wooden box and gazed at its creaky boards. She said, "I want to keep the candle here forever." Jonathan smiled and knelt beside her. He took a small glass jar from his pocket. Inside was a cluster of tiny candles, one for each year of her life. He placed the jar beside the box. Emma's eyes widened. "For every birthday," she whispered. He nodded. "For every birthday." Claire hugged them both. They sat on an old crate in the shed, now bathed in afternoon light. Emma picked a small candle, struck a match, and lit it. The warm glow flickered. She closed her eyes and whispered a wish for family days just like this, for laughter, for new memories. Jonathan watched her breathe out the flame, and he felt his own heart let go of any shadows. As evening approached, they returned to the main house. Claire prepared a simple dinner: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, and mashed potatoes. The aroma filled the kitchen. Emma set the table with care. Jonathan washed the dishes after dinner, scrubbing pots and pans while Emma dried each plate. Claire sat at the counter with her sketchbook, drawing the scene. They all worked together, quietly, happily. Washing dishes had never seemed so joyful. After dinner, they built a small fire in the garden fire pit. The air was cool, and the flames crackled. Emma roasted marshmallows on long sticks. Her marshmallow melted and dripped on her fingers. She licked it off, giggling. Jonathan roasted one and handed it to Claire. They sat close, sharing the warmth of the fire and the sweetness of the night. Jonathan held Emma between his legs, and she leaned back against him. He wrapped his arms around her and kissed the top of her head. Claire spoke softly. "I'm proud of you." Jonathan looked at her. "I'm grateful," he said, "for you both, and for this new life we've found." They sat in comfortable silence, watching embers drift into the sky. A lone cricket sang in the dark. Fireflies flickered among the rose bushes. Emma pointed at them, magic in her eyes. Jonathan remembered how as a child he chased fireflies in his grandmother's yard. He swore he would never let that childhood wonder slip away from his daughter. Later, they brought Emma inside and tucked her into her bed. Claire read her a bedtime story about a brave butterfly who found her own brilliant colors. Emma yawned and closed her eyes, clutching her new butterfly drawing. Jonathan stood by the door, watching her. She mumbled, "I love you, Daddy." Before drifting off, he whispered back, "I love you too, my darling." Jonathan and Claire turned off the hall light and closed the door gently. They walked back to their bedroom, hand in hand. Jonathan paused in the hallway and looked back toward Emma's room. He felt a swell of love deeper than yesterday, stronger than any deal he had signed. He realized that each day brought choices, work or family, perfection or presence. He had chosen presence, and that choice would shape every tomorrow. In the morning, Jonathan would rise early again, but now he knew the first moments of his day would belong to Emma, to Claire, to the small joys they built together. The world could wait. He would answer calls and make decisions, but not until he had given his family the gift of his attention. That night, as he lay beside Claire, he reached over to hold her hand. She turned and kissed him softly. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Jonathan closed his eyes. He thanked her too. He thanked Emma. He thanked the candle in the old shed, the butterfly drawings, the bubble room, and the fireflies. He thanked all the simple wonders that reminded him of what mattered. He slipped into sleep with a smile on his face, a smile born of full days and warm hearts. He slept deeply, secure in the knowledge that he had found true wealth, love, time, and the simple gift of being present. And in his dreams, he saw Emma's bright eyes, the flicker of candlelight, and the promise of all the birthdays yet to come.